Hello, hello, hello. Sorry I'm late. I'm sure no one's particularly worried about it, but it's all good. This is definitely a short one today. I say that every session, but then I end up going for a full hour anyway. But today, not only am I tired, but I also want to kind of take my study offline and enjoy some chess on the World Chess Championship. So, yeah, I am going to just get into a few questions. Go through them pretty quickly, I think. And yeah, I had some people requesting critical reasoning, so it doesn't look like they've joined, but in case they come back and decide to look at my VOD, I will honor that and go with that, and hopefully it's useful, and maybe they can join me next time. But anyway, and let's go. Hey, okay, well apparently got it wrong. I have to say, this prompt was really terrible. Um, Hang on, I'm just gonna double check if, yeah, cool. Yeah, this prompt was really bad. Um, like, it took me a few reads to try to understand what it was saying. And that's not to say that that doesn't happen with good prompts, but I think this one was particularly bad. So, because even after I did that, I'm still not 100% confident that I did actually understand it, which is probably why I got it wrong. But yeah, let's step through it really quickly. So first thing, look at the question stem. What is it actually asking for? It's asking to cast serious doubt on the conclusion above. So which of these options essentially will weaken the point, weaken the conclusion? And so we have to understand what the conclusion is and then look for something that weakens it. So the year after a company whose success depends on product innovation has a profitable year. Now, one, there needs to be some commas there. Like, this is basic sentence correction in a critical reasoning question, but there needs to be some commas here saying the year after a company, comma, whose success depends on product innovation, comma, has a profitable year, So we're now saying they've had a profitable year in the next year, and this is for a company who depends on innovation for success. It invests more cash in its research and development department to attempt to generate innovations that can ensure future success. That is such a bad sentence. This would be an incorrect answer on sentence correction. Now, one, whose success needs to be offset by commas, and two, the year after a company whose success depends on product innovation has a profitable year, it invests the year invests more cash? No, the company invests more cash, and that is not what the subject of this sentence is the year, it's not the company. Now, after a company is just a modifier modifying year. So this is saying the year it invests more cash in its research. So it's just, like I said, terrible sentence. And I want to blame the bad sentence for me getting it wrong, but we'll see if that actually plays a factor or not. Yeah, so long story short, what I understood it is trying to say is that if a company depends on innovation for success, and typically what that company will do is invest heavily in the year after a successful year. So I guess because they have more money, probably, like I'm inferring, they have more money from their success, so they reinvest it to make sure that they're staying ahead of the curve with their innovation. And so that's just my inference from just reading that first line. And I had to read that sentence like a few times because it's such a bad sentence. Anyway, therefore, so here's the conclusion. Companies whose success depends on product innovation should generate more innovations during the years following profitable years of business than during years following unprofitable years of business. Now, so they're saying, okay, if they invest more, then it stands to reason that they will have more innovation. Now, I think the assumption there's probably a few underlying assumptions behind that. The first one that kind of jumps out at me is, well, they're assuming that investment correlates with innovation. Like, innovation could just be pure luck. You could throw millions of dollars at something and not get anywhere, or you could, whatever. So it's probably a reasonable assumption, but it's an assumption, right? So they're kind of assuming that. And so anything that speaks to breaking that assumption, so if there was a point that said something, like if one of the answer choices talked about, evidence suggests that there is no correlation between investment and innovation, like if something said something like that would clearly weaken the point. Then the other thing would be if, like, increased investment, if having that investment somehow detracted from being able to innovate as well. I don't really know what kind of thing that might be, but basically saying investment has some negative impact to an innovation. Because we've already taken it as fact that innovation leads to success. It's, as they said, right, their success depends on innovation, on product innovation specifically. So we're taking that as a fact. So what we need to see is some evidence that this investment won't lead to innovation. Won't necessarily lead to it anyway. So that was my kind of filter that I was sort of applying. It was going to be based on either that breaking that assumption or something that counters the underlying premise. So go to the answer choices. Its employees ask for higher wages than they do at other times. Now, sure, maybe they do. Like, we've just had some money come into the company. We know the company has money. We just had a good year. I earned a promotion. I earned a pay rise. Maybe they do. It doesn't have anything to do with the success of the company, right? Because the conclusion was that they'll generate more innovations. Now, whether or not someone's getting paid more has nothing to do with how many innovations they're making. or how much innovation is happening. So irrelevant, ruled it out. Now B, which was apparently the correct answer, its management participates more in research and development and makes process alterations. Now this I ruled out for a similar reason as A. I thought that it's not irrelevant, but it's not really clearly saying anything either. Like, what does management getting involved have to do with how much they innovate? Does management participating mean that they're going to innovate more? Because more senior people are getting involved, and more experienced people are putting their heads together or whatever. Or does management getting involved and making process alterations, what if those process alterations are productive? So they're saying, the fact that they're saying this is the correct answer to me is saying, well, we're assuming that management getting involved and altering the process is going to hinder innovation somehow. I don't think that's a given. I think there's a big leap to say that that's that you can assume that. But anyway, I'll look at what they said to see if I still agree at the end. But anyway, C. So I ruled that one out. C. Its research and development team members propose more project ideas that the company does not have time to act on than usual. I mean, that one is in at least the right spirit. So I didn't dismiss it as quickly as A and B, because that is speaking to the idea that less innovation is going to happen than we think. But I didn't think it was a good answer. I kind of kept it as a weak maybe, just in case the rest were actually also were even worse. But it was in the right spirit, and what I mean by that is that they may not actually be innovating as much as we think. Now the reason I think it's weak is that just because you can't action every idea that someone comes up with doesn't mean you're not actioning a lot more. And if you're actioning a lot more, then you have more chances for innovation probably. So I don't think the fact that more ideas are being proposed means that there will be less innovation. I think it still means there will be more innovation. It's just not going to be the maximum amount based on the fact that they can't act on everything. So it's weak, but it's at least in the right direction, where the first two I thought were not. The first two I thought were completely irrelevant, but anyway. D, its management increases monetary team rewards for successful innovation. That to me directly strengthens the conclusion above, which is to say that that's gonna help create more innovation. So I thought that was a terrible, that's immediately ruled out. And then E, its innovations increase in quantity, but have a higher rate of failure when applied to the market. So I thought this, right? I ended up choosing this. In hindsight, it's not perfect either. None of them actually are, but I thought that this was the closest to a good answer because I still thought it was a weak answer, but I thought it was the best of a bunch of weak answers. And the reason I thought that is, if they say its innovations increase in quantity, okay, that's strengthening the conclusion. They have more innovations, but have a higher rate of failure. I kind of thought that part is the part that weakens the original point, which was to say, okay, just because the company depends on innovation doesn't mean any innovation is good enough, right? It's like saying, well, our company depends on they say advertising, right? Any news is good news or something like that. Well, if you're in a massive scandal, company's in a massive scandal, then maybe not, right? So same logic here. Its innovations increase in quantity, but have a high rate of failure. If they've just put out a bunch of crappy innovations, then it's not actually going to help their success. Depending on product innovation, I think it's reasonable to assume that those product innovations have to be strong. And so, yeah, I guess it's similar to one of the other answers that I said, where just because more of them fail doesn't mean they all fail, and if enough of them succeed, then you're still coming out ahead. Like, I think that, like what I said that about C, I think. So it's actually probably very similar to that. So in hindsight, yeah, maybe it's not the best, but I mean, I already thought C was like a week maybe. Anyway, so for me it ended up being between C and E, and I thought E was the better of the two, and that's kind of why I chose it. But let's see what they thought. Yeah, so you can see the explanation. Reading the question, the first sentence is a fact and the second provides an opinion. Cool, I knew that after it took me ages to read that first sentence. We have another pseudo-syllogistic argument, so we can parse it by term matching. Now, I have seen that type of strategy before. It still doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Like pseudo-syllogistic, so you're comparing fake, I don't know, whatever. It's like matching terms from the answer choices to things said in the question to somehow draw conclusions. I don't really get it, but let's see what they said. Evidence term. Companies whose success depends on product innovation equals companies whose success depends on product innovation. Okay, sure. Well, that's not actually in the answer choices. So it's comparing evidence term from the argument with the conclusion term, specifically in the... Oh no, it's all within the argument. It's comparing company whose success depends on product innovation with companies whose success depends on product innovation. So premise, conclusion, or what they call evidence and conclusion. Year after profitable year, invest more in R&D, should generate more innovations, does not equal. Okay. The kind of companies and the timing. So that was just understanding the question, which I guess is the first thing I said I did before I even went to answer choices, which I guess is what they did too. Just a weird way of phrasing it. Anyway, the kinds of companies and the timing of the actions in question both match up well. The mismatch is in the last row, especially between the verbs invest and generate. Mismatches in the last row between invest and generate. Yeah, invest doesn't necessarily mean success. So even if it's a fact that they invest in R&D the year after a good year, does not mean that they should generate more innovations the year after a good year. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's not, the timing could be after delay. That's how we can know, which is actually the same thing that I identified. Well, it's one of the two things I identified. Applying the filter. Our filter does not show up exactly as expected, but we're looking for yes on the investing and no on the generating, a failure to generate. So choices A, C, and E all sound negative, but don't necessarily impede the company's ability to generate the innovations. I mean, I think that's similar to what I said. Employers ask for higher wages than they do at other times. So that's negative, but doesn't necessarily impede innovation. And I kind of said the same thing about these two. They're just better than the rest. Well, I thought anyway. So A, C, and E all sound negative, but don't necessarily impede the company's ability to generate the innovations. We're left with B and D. D, if anything, might help generating innovations. What I said as well. That's good. Choice B could be helpful or harmful but it's the only one left. And if the processes have been altered, they could be worse. The correct answer is B. Okay. That, I don't like that explanation. Because this is ambiguous. It could be better, it could be worse. It's exactly what I said. And they're saying that, well, like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not a good logic. That's not good logic. We ruled out A, C, and E because, yes, they're negative, but it doesn't necessarily mean they can't generate innovations. So we've ruled them out. But then in the same breath, we're saying B could be bad, could be good. So how is that not ruling it out? I mean, if we had just read B first, would we not have ruled it out and then gone to A, C, and E and then, excuse me, decided that, like, it would have been better? Like, I mean, that's kind of how it happened for me, I suppose, but I at least cycled through and said, okay, well, I've got a bunch of bad answers. Which one do I objectively think is the best of the bad answers? They just ruled out some and then said, well, now we're only left with one. So even though it's even though it's worse, probably it's the only one left. That's terrible. I don't like that answer. I don't like that explanation at all. I think that's probably wrong. Excuse me. Anyway, like I said, short one. So at this point, I think I'm only going to do one more question. I will reset my clock though. And let's go. In early civilizations. I just gotta turn the music down in my headphones. That's better. What? Another wrong answer, apparently. Well, at least the right answer was my 50-50. Alright, let's go through this one. We have a bold-faced question. And so, in the argument given, the two bold-faced portions play which of the following roles? I think that's more or less always the structure for a bold-faced question. In early civilizations, the development of the first calendar system often coincided with the advancement of mathematics and astronomy. Now, you don't need to read anything else to know that that first line is just providing some evidence. It's a premise. And I can skip ahead to the end and read the other bold-faced sentence, which is what I did. Therefore, in all likelihood, the advancement of agrarian science, which motivated the development of measuring seasons and time, led to improved understanding of mathematics and astronomy in early civilizations. Well, that's clearly a conclusion, and probably the overriding conclusion of the argument. So I already know, without reading the whole thing, first sentence evidence, last sentence main conclusion. Now, I kind of scanned the answer choices to see if I could rule anything out immediately just from that first read, and I could. The first is a claim. The first is a claim. A and B are definitely out. Now, B, the first is evidence that has been used to support blah, 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 blah. The second is the main conclusion of the argument. That sounded very aligned with what I thought, so I kept it. Now, D and E, they get a little bit tricky, I think, because they sort of swap out the word claim with finding, or claim or evidence with finding. So finding is a little bit ambiguous in terms of, is a finding a claim? Is it a conclusion? Or is a finding, are they reporting findings of some sort of scientific research or something? Like, is it evidence? Like, it's hard to kind of tell just from the word. So I kind of have to read them. And so yeah, the first is a finding whose implications are at issue in the argument. So that sounds like it's saying the first is someone else's conclusion, which is being disputed, which is somewhat true, actually. But anyway, the second is a claim presented in order to argue against deriving certain implications from that finding. It's a really wordy kind of way of saying what I understood to mean. Well, so it's a conclusion, a claim, a conclusion, so that much is fine. And it's arguing against kind of drawing anything to, you can't kind of draw any strong conclusions from the first piece of evidence. So the fact that the development of the first calendar system often coincided with the advancement of mathematics and astronomy, we can't draw any real conclusions from that. That's the conclusion. So that's what this is saying. So I don't exactly know what agrarian science is, but I presume it's the science around making calendars. And you know what? I might just Google that very quickly just to see what comes up if I search for it. Agrarian sciences, for some reason that only comes up in Portuguese. Or Moldova. Alright, I'm gonna type agrarian science meaning. Agricultural sciences. Sciences dealing with food and fiber. Is agricultural the same as agrarian? Agrarian definition. Relating to land tenure, the division of landed property. Alright, so this is what happens when you don't understand a word. Now, nothing in that sentence, like nothing in that argument, sorry, gave me any impression that this was talking about land or the study of land. I feel like this has been a second terrible question in a row, and it's making me question using this resource anymore, if I'm honest. But while I'm here, anyway. So, in all likelihood, the advancement of agrarian science, which motivated the development of measuring seasons and time. So, measuring seasons and time, that again is implying kind of sciences around calendar making. So, maybe this study of land is also a study of time and calendars, whatever. Anyway, led to improved understanding of mathematics and astronomy in early civilization. See, I thought this was wrong just because, okay, this is what I said earlier. This is claiming that, okay, the first one is a finding that's at dispute, which is true. And then the second boldface sentence is basically saying you can't put too much stock in the first one. But this seems to actually strengthen it. For me, this says, okay, therefore, in all likelihood, yes, it's likely that the advancement of calendar making, which is, again, what I'm understanding agrarian science to mean based on what they describe it as, Well, not so much what it is, but the fact that it pushed it, at least, led to improved understanding of mathematics and astronomy in early civilizations. That's not saying that's not arguing against deriving implications. That is deriving an implication. That is saying, like, because of, like, here's this claim, or here's this, sorry, yeah, essentially it's a claim. It's evidence, but it's a claim. And then all this stuff further explains it, but based on all of that put together, actually, yeah, it's probably fine. So that's got to be wrong. Like, anyway. And then E, the first is a finding whose accuracy is evaluated in the argument. The second is evidence presented to establish that the finding is accurate. So that also, I guess, could be true, depending on the first part there could be true. The second is evidence presented to establish that the finding is accurate. That's what ruled it out for me, because this is clearly a conclusion. So E was ruled out, and I thought that was easy. So A and B were ruled out based on the fact that the first wasn't a claim, so it wasn't a conclusion. This is ruled out based on the fact that the second is a conclusion. And I guess those are the easy ones to rule out, and then you've got C and D. And I ruled out D, I thought, relatively easily too, leaving us with A, which seemed very in line with what I expected to see. So, yeah. This will be an interesting explanation. Reading the question, we see boldface text, so we know that the question will require us to only to identify the logical role of the various parts of the prompt. Awesome. Sentence starts with, includes, function. First, in early civilizations, a fact. Second, granted, fact, somewhat contradictory. Third, so what this is saying is, just look at the start of every sentence and see what it's doing. So first sentence, in early civilizations, it's giving a fact, sure. Second, granted, fact but contradictory. Yep, cool, makes sense. Third, nevertheless, fact, somewhat reconciling, so kind of bringing it back. Fourth, therefore, an opinion / conclusion. All right, so that's more or less consistent with what I worked out, except I didn't really look at this. I kind of saw that without going into detail. I did read it, but I read it in one quick scan, and I sort of saw, yeah, granted this, nevertheless that, and they're giving arguments for and against it. Or they're giving evidence for and against it, like that's kind of what I could tell. And therefore is just a very clear marker that it's a conclusion and a main conclusion. So, creating a filter, the first three sentences present facts, the final sentence is the opinion. Boldface 1 equals fact, 2 boldface equals opinion. Awesome, exactly what I did. Applying the filter, choices A and B are out because they call one A. They call one a claim. Perfect. E is out because it calls the second statement evidence. Perfect. Exactly what I did. So far, so good. We're left with C and D. I mean, I didn't rule out E at this point, although I kind of could have just based on scan, but yeah. We're left with C and D. According to C, the first statement supports the conclusion. Is that true? I thought so. No. D is correct. The first statement talks about attributing math development to the development of a calendar, but the final opinion attributes math to agrarian science. The correct answer is D. So they're actually saying, okay, agrarian science is definitely different. But like, alright, I mean, fair enough. If I knew what agrarian science was, then maybe that becomes easier to answer. But to my mind, the development of the first calendar system is kind of aligned with the development of measuring seasons and time. Yeah, I don't know about that. Could be right. They're probably right. I'll blame my 11 p.m. brain for it. And on that note, I'm going to do one quant question just because I want to make sure I still do some. Let's go into problem solving. This is risky because I don't even know what topic it is, so I don't know if it's one that I've looked at any kind of level. Distance to the moon. Alright. Let's go. Bloody hell. Okay. Turn it on. I did guess at the end there because I knew I had gone long on time, which just seemed to be the one that made the most sense. But of course, that was not a good way to go about it. Yeah, I should have looked at that. Instead of looking at that as 3 times 3, kind of getting close to something like 9, I should have looked at that more as yeah. Okay, I think I know what I could have done. Yeah, I think I know what I could have done. Like what I just started saying was I could have taken that to be 38 and 32 instead of 3.8 and 3.2, and then just adjusted the exponents, and then that would have been a lot easier to work with. It's 38 times 32, I can work that out. You know, it's going to be roughly what? 20. Yeah, it would be roughly 1200. Yeah, 38 times 32 would be roughly 1200. So, and if it's roughly 1200, I can take the 2 zeros back out. That's the thing that I did that was a bit stupid. I could have just treated them both as one number because that's what they are. It's just sort of scientific notation for it. Treat them as one number. 38 times 32, get that number, that's roughly 1200, like I said. Then take the zeros back out and put it all under one notation. It's 10 to the 5, 10 to the 9, and then an extra 2 zeros. No, we take the zeros back out, and it comes down to, yeah, okay. Sorry, I just got really rambly. 3.8, if I make that 38, it becomes 10 to the 4, 32, 10 to the 3. You get to around 1200, take the zeros back out, you end up back at 10 to the 5, 10 to the 4 again. But you end up with 12 as the number, more or less, give or take 12. So I'm now looking at the 1.2s. Actually, when I say it's roughly 12, I guess it is probably exactly 12 because 38. I mean, I ballparked it based on 3.8 rounding up to 4 and 3.2 rounding down to 3. But the fact that they're the same distance away probably means that it actually balanced out, so it was actually correct. Just going to double check that with an actual calculator for a second and make sure my logic is good there. 38 times 32 should equal 1200, I guess. Well, just over 1216. Which is that's what I thought. It was going to be close to 1200. So yeah, but it's long story short, it's in the 1.2 range. So it's going to be one of C or D, and then it's just a matter of making sure I have the right number of zeros in there. So what we're looking at then is 9, I mean, I feel like it's, oof. Clearly I need to work on this topic because I'm still looking at that going, okay, I got into the 1.2, that's fine. But now to get the right number of zeros. Are we not just sort of saying, well, that's going to have it's going to be 12. Aha, right. It's going to, yeah, we're going back to we add the 5 and the 4 together, you get 9, and then we're taking 12, moving it back 1 to make it 1.2. So we add that in as well, which makes it 10. So 10 to the 10, 1.2, that's what makes C the answer. Yeah, it's actually pretty obvious once I have like 10 minutes to talk through it. Oh jeez. Well, the good news is tomorrow morning, hopefully I will be fresh enough to actually handle a couple of these questions and do okay in them. We'll see. Anyway, explanation. In this question we can use dimensional analysis, the practice of writing and multiplying fractions such that units cancel as desired. Dimensional analysis is not a term I've ever heard before, but let's see what that means. Writing in the units. Well, yeah, number of kilometers multiplied by that. Sure. We can drop the units now since we'll be working in feet from this point forward. I mean, that's exactly what I said. That's fine. And I had brackets in there, but the brackets weren't relevant. Like, I mean, you can see what I wrote there. It's kind of, yeah, the brackets weren't really necessary in the end. And to be honest, I didn't even finish the calculation because I was more or less running out of time and took a guess instead. So there you go. That is what that is. There are many approaches. Okay, yeah, so yeah, 3.8 times that times 3.2 times that, which gives you 3.8 times 3.2 times 10 to the 9. Cool. Totally comfortable with all that. There are many approaches to making this calculation easier. One approach is to ignore the decimals at first and observe that we have almost 40 32s. Cool, and that's actually what I ended up doing after time ran out. Since it's 38 32s, it's 40 32s minus 2 32s, or 64. But the bottom line is and it's good to reserve some space on the side of your noteboard for when you do some multiplying or dividing that warrants writing. Okay, anyway. Forty 32s minus 2 32s. I mean, I think my ballpark got me there quicker than that. But anyway, it is what it is. 12.16 times 10 to the 9, 1.216 times 10 to the 10. Yeah, that's fine. That's all pretty much what I ended up working out. Alright, that's me, guys. This one actually is slightly shorter than normal, so that's cool. Although at some point, hopefully I won't be so tired on these sessions. But yeah, I don't think I'm gonna have a lot of long sessions while the Chess World Championship is on, so I'm gonna chuck that on and do a little bit more study offline until I end up passing out. So yeah, anyone who's watching this, thanks for joining. Hope you enjoyed this quick session where I got every question wrong. Oh man, I am in great shape, aren't I? Anyway, thanks.